Hello again, Struck. Well, do you think we were done with the Diablo 4 content? Well, we aren't. There is more from IGN's interview. A little bit of a segment from IGN's interview with Rod Ferguson and Joe Shelley from the Diablo 4 team has been released regarding information that concerns the world map, the open world and how it was designed and how the campaign was designed, as well as the Renown System and how it helps players get rewarded for exploring the game's world. So I hope that that's information that's useful to you. That's something that you're excited about. If you aren't, I've got other videos covering other parts of that interview. All of those have here and there some of my brutally honest thoughts, and so will this video, especially at the end. So I hope you enjoyed. Buckle up and let's go. Let's start with the world map. Designing the world map in Diablo 4, what the team did, why, and what their philosophy was when doing that. The team has put a lot of work into Diablo 4's world map. They had to define how the world map works for the first time in Diablo 4 because it is an open world with all of the activities players can do, quote here, without turning into a task list, end quote. Their goal was for the map to show you all of the cool things you can do. So it was about finding a balance as well as communicating important information about the world. For example, geographical information such as where a mountain range is and how would be the best way to get past that mountain range. There has been a lot of iteration on how the map can show you all the exciting things you can do while making sure the map's not turning into a checklist. Another goal was to make sure that the map's art style blends well with the artistic direction and aesthetic of Diablo 4. They were aiming for an old map look, quoting here when I say old map, and that feels like a part of the world's fantasy, but still is accurate and useful the way a map should be, similar to modern world maps. Another thing that they talked about is open world and designing the campaign and how those two things fit well together and the way they've designed them. When players hear open world, they imagine an organic open world design similar to Breath of the Wild. This is the game that the developers themselves mentioned, and they also use that term organic. But Diablo 4's open world is not the same as the open world in Breath of the Wild. Here's how it differs. Diablo 4's story allows for linearity, but also options for a branching story. Quoting here when I say branching story. There is a story, and they wanted to have a beginning, middle, and an end. They wanted to start at a certain place as well as to end at a certain place. They are providing players with the freedom of choice while playing through the campaign to pick how they want to play through the branches. There's a quick decision early on in the game, which is once you get past the provoke, that lets players choose freely between acts. It, I'm gonna quote here, branches and comes back, which means you go and do an act and then you go back to that choice, which act you do next. So I'm gonna do act 2, do I wanna do act 3 next, do I wanna do act 4 first, and so on. This is what they mean. And since it's an open world, players can actually take a pause from the main story and just enjoy exploring and doing side activities. Of course, that's if the player enjoys exploring and doing side activities in the first place. There are a lots of side quests and a lot of things in the world that you can do that aren't on the main campaign's, quoting here, golden path. The developers said that choice was important when designing the game, and it's around every corner. Choice of class, of look, of skills, your paragons, the ability to pick whether you turn left or right or turn around is all up to the player. Letting the players choose what they want to do while they explore. They might want to go and do dungeons or world events or walk events so that they can later on take a world boss. Ferguson talks how having freedom of choice while still retaining the option of being, quote here, told where to go, end quote, is important. Diablo 4's main questline will always provide, in their words, guideposts to help players get back to the campaign experience that is guided. He said when talking to other game developers about open world, it's a little bit of an illusion that people want to have. That players say they want open world and free choice, but they also want to be told where to go, and that's what they wanted to achieve. Both of those things. So Diablo 4 open world design was built for combat. It built different. Every inch, if you know what I mean, is built for combat as it is a main focus of the game and of the genre. They didn't want to make an open world where players would expect a lot of travel downtime. I'm gonna repeat, a lot of travel downtime. They did not want this. One of the main goals was transport the possibility of being attacked at every moment on the map. Their goal was to make a world where at any point you stop, a monster could attack you and a fight would happen. Something that they fine-tuned a lot during testing to get into a sweet spot was monster density. Since the goal was, quote, at any moment, at any place, you could have a fight, stopping the quote, getting the density right is extremely important. And this is my thoughts that getting it right is extremely important. It changes how they thought about the design and how you moved between the zones and how all that stuff plays out. It's again quoting kind of calibrated for action. Nice quote, by the way. They laughingly said that at one point it was too dense and they dialed it back a little bit so that it's not difficult to travel through a zone even by mount. They also didn't want players to have an experience where they're riding through miles and miles of empty terrain to get to cool and exciting stuff. Rather, the goal was the world to have cool and interesting things to do. This combined with the choice of order in which players um, complete acts can provide a different experience for the players who switch things up when it comes to that order of the acts and their new story playthrough on outs. So apparently it will be more challenging if you go through an act that is designed for a later part of the story, for a higher level, with features that don't show up in an earlier act, such as strongholds. So do strongholds? If I'm misremembering or not, I don't know here, but I remember something when they were talking about strongholds some several months ago, maybe a year ago or so, in one of their um, quarterly blog posts, that strongholds show up after Act 2 or maybe after Act 3, something like that. I think strongholds were Act 2, so if you switch it up and start with Act 2 instead of Act 1, you would have strongholds at the beginning, and it might be a little bit more difficult. Maybe that's what they meant when they were talking about that. There's going to be lots of stuff to do whether you're mounted or navigating on foot, so keep that in mind. They made the roads in the game to actually be a good way to travel from point A to point B, to travel the area with less chance of getting attacked while moving on those trodden paths. Now let's talk a little bit about the Renown system. This is where I have a massive remark to make regarding some contradictions of what they're saying and how they're designing the game. Diablo 4's Renown system was designed with Diablo 4's open world in mind. They made a system that fits that setting and offers a way for players to get rewarded for actively exploring the world of Sanctuary during their campaign journey. Completing the side objectives in certain zones would reward players with skill points that can be used on the current character as well as on any outs they make. Which means players will have an easier time when making outs if they unlock those bonus skill points to start with. But this is also a bit contradictory to their claims of not turning into a checklist, because when you tie something as important as skill points to the side activities, it turns exactly into that, into a checklist. It is exactly that, a checklist of having to go around and doing all those side activities so you can collect all your skill points that the game has robbed you of and is forcing you to do extra grind for, on top of simply just leveling up your hero. It's similar to collecting devotion points in Grim Dawn, except it sounds like you need to fully complete all zones activities to collect the skill points rewards. Unless, and this is a big unless, the skill points reward is only from specific activities and you can skip the rest. So those might be optional skill points, but ARPG gamers, hack and slash gamers know that there is nothing optional when it comes to skill points in action RPGs, and every point matters. So this turns the optional into an actional, into an actual checklist. And again, this is the point. Even if it's only a certain activity that rewards checkpoints, and you don't need to do the whole zone because they made it sound that in a way like you need to do the whole zone to get to the skill points reward. Even if it's just a single activity, you would still feel like you're doing chores, like you're moving around. If you don't like side activities, you would still feel forced to do those because skill points, because one of the most important things, especially they're saying that the game is designed around skills. The combat is skill based rather than gear based. Sure, gear boosts your stuff, but the skills and the build is extremely important based on what they've said. So in a case like that, that means that skill points are even more valuable than ever in that game, and tying those to side activities and to a checklist of having to do this one in that zone, this one in that zone, and so on, is contradictory to what they've been claiming earlier when I was saying that they don't want things to turn into a checklist. To get notified when I upload more content like this one or other builds and guides for Wooter and not so Wooter games, you can subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on notifications. As well as keep in mind there's something called memberships on YouTube, which lets you be a paying member for my channel to get access to perks such as emotes and badges made by me, as well as the option to get one-on-one tutoring for the very basics of Adobe Photoshop, Premiere and After Effects. And memberships can be cancelled at any time if you no longer want to be a member. Thanks for watching all the way until the end, Struck Web. Keep it cool until next time, and goodbye.